Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with a humongous news update for The Outer Worlds. Game Informer has confirmed that its newest cover story is going to be The Outer Worlds, meaning lots and lots of brand new information coming our way, and in turn I will be covering every single bit of it because I am hyped to the high heavens for this game. Also, a big shout out to patron Bearded Panda. He made this video possible by sending me all the screenshots from the digital edition of Game Informer so I can make this video for you guys. He is the difference maker. Let's get started with the physical release and pricing of The Outer Worlds. In addition to its availability on digital platforms, The Outer Worlds will also be available on disc at physical retail on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Regardless of format, Private Division has shared with us that the game will retail for $60. While we know the platforms and price, Obsidian and Private Division are still not ready to share a release date for the game. As of now, we only know The Outer Worlds has a planned release date sometime in 2019. I personally predict it's going to be the fall of this year and that they're going to promote this more during E3 at the Xbox conference. As for why it's significant that the game is having a physical release for $60, this is supposed to be a smaller RPG akin to something like KOTOR 2, so around the 20 to 25 hour mark, maybe 30 tops, which is why some people were confused on the pricing. Also, physical releases is a big deal for Obsidian because a lot of their recent games, like for example Tyranny, never saw a boxed release. So seeing The Outer Worlds actually getting into physical retail is a huge step forward for that. Now on to the big write-up for the cover story of Game Informer. Lots and lots of juicy details here, so get comfortable. We're going to be reading a lot. This is an alternate history where the era of the robber barons from the late 19th and early 20th century never ended, Boyarsky says. And he goes on to talk a bit about the corporations in the game. So that's our first step into this new information, is this is actually going to be a alternate history game, which is something I personally didn't expect, and I am a sucker for alternate history. Like the Order 1886, I love it. Next, the first colony ship arrived decades ago and started to set up the new colonies. It was filled with farmers and administrators, teachers and corporate heads, everyone necessary to lay the groundwork before the rest of the functioning society would come in a second wave. But the second ship arrived far too late, and the government decided to leave the ship in a parking orbit where it wouldn't bother anyone. Things have been going downhill ever since. It's 70 years later when the frozen experiments of an unhinged scientist bring one of the frozen colonists out of stasis, that being you, the player. So that's a little more background info on the introduction to the game, just filling in a couple of gaps, but more importantly is how this leads into character creation. Our approach to character creation is something we've wanted to do for a long time, Kane says. Because we have this huge colony ship with all these frozen colonists, we show this cinematic of the scientists finding the ship and breaking into these rooms of frozen bodies. He pulls up a station that controls an arm and starts dialing things. As you are doing character creation and selecting attributes, this thing is selecting different frozen people and he's making comments about them. Slide intelligence all the way down, and Phineas wonders aloud how this one passed the basic test to become a colonist. Boost up endurance, and he remarks how you might be able to eat and hold down a wholesale tuna, a disgusting salmon-tuna hybrid common in Halcyon's world. Each attribute selection affects related skills. The Outer Worlds is a classless RPG. Your character is built and improves in a free-form way, letting you pick any skills you think might be interesting. Perhaps as a subtle comment on the quirky notion of a character built to only do one thing, you choose your would-be colonist's aptitude, a vocation assigned by the corporation, which would have defined their life had things gone according to plan. Jobs like elevator operations specialist and beverage delivery technician speak to the drudgery that might have been imparted upon colonists. The approximately 24 aptitude options provide minor bonuses to your adventuring capabilities. So there are vocations, and on top of that, this game has one of the coolest world building manners of character creation as you interact with a key component of the story, but also they remark the stats you are building as that process goes down. This game has a lot of humor built into it, so I'm curious to see what happens when you slide that intelligence all the way down, what Phineas actually has to say, or if I slide my charm all the way up, can I swoon Phineas? These are important questions that I simply need to ask as an RPG fan. Equally as exciting is the tone of the game. Throughout demos and explanations, it's clear The Outer World flirts with gray tones of morality, teasing player expectations, and daring you to try something off the beaten path. Things are rarely what they appear to be, and choices made by the player have far-reaching consequences, which naturally in turn leads to replayability. The focus of this game is not to be one of those huge 70-hour open world games that you play once, maybe you shoot through a second time if you have the time for it. This is a game designed to have multiple playthroughs, which is why it's a more tightly crafted, compact experience. So having choices with far-reaching consequence has me personally excited, because I love tiny experiences where I can go back again and again and again and have something different happen each time. The game systems observe your activities in-game and constantly look for ways to reinforce the sense of your agency in the universe. Loading screens like those seen here show off the way your interaction with a single area of the game might change the way propagandist media reports on your decisions. The Outer Worlds is a shorter experience, once again, than some other recent first-person RPGs, but Obsidian is banking on broad player choice in the character customization, storyline divergence, and multiple endings to supply replayability and engagement. Now let's get into a huge text wall. This is a write-up about a brand new demo that only Game Informer has seen. So far, the only gameplay/demo available to the public is actually the other one that Game Informer had uploaded, so hopefully we eventually see this. A new demo picks up shortly after the newly awoken character arrives in Edgewater, a community on Terra 2 run by Spacer's Choice, a corporation virtually defined by its shoddy products. It's not the best choice, it's the Spacer's Choice, their slogan reads. Edgewater, located on the idyllic sounding Emerald Vale, is falling apart. Decades of corporate stewardship try to maintain a facade that is barely holding together for either the buildings or the people who live in them. The local Saltuna canning factory has a supply problem, so the foodstuff now receives an injection of new minerals in the form of ground-up rocks. The fake window panels once hung to communicate quaint hominess have started to rust and tumble from the walls of the prefab structures. Nonetheless, the people here put on the mask of contentment, especially since the local sect of the Order of Scientific Inquiry religion enforces the dogma that everyone is in their right place, and it's heretical to divert from the grand plan. Religion is very central to how the board wants society to run, Boyarsky says. We meet Martin Abernathy, an old man who doesn't want anyone to know he's got a case of the plague. Old and sick individuals are less valuable to the company, so naturally they're less likely to get medicine to make them better. When he realizes we're not part of the system, he begs us to retrieve a cache of medicine that sits outside of the town in an anarchic area controlled by marauding thugs. After leaving to start the mission, we're intercepted by Esther Blaine, an actuary who knows about Abernathy's desires. She's convinced she can help more people if we bring the meds back to her to sell to other townspeople. Town areas are mostly hubs for conversation, commerce, and exploration. Step outside the walls and the broader Emerald Vale is far from safe. In search for our lost medical supplies, marauders who have abandoned the colonist life patrol through dilapidated buildings that recall a failed attempt at, hold on, let me give this one a shot, Art Nouveau decor. Hopefully I got that. In some encounters, high grass offers an ideal opportunity to try out stealth. While crouched within the undergrowth, enemies show a triangle of awareness above their heads, and higher skills keep them oblivious at closer ranges and situations. Lockpicking, thankfully without a minigame, offers a route into secured locations. The entire mission can be accomplished without raising the alarm. When our character has had enough sneaking around, the action is prefaced by the tap of a button to trigger tactical time dilation. This limited resource is an after effect of the freezing process and lets the character get a jump on the enemy during combat, ideal for both strategic players and those who might not count first-person shooting among their best gaming talents. The special ability can be used to open a fight or in the midst of a particularly harried exchange. TTD recharges over time, and it lends a tactical layer to each battle as you cycle through the wide array of melee and ranged weapon options. In the demo, a mix of stealth and frenzied battles with the deranged marauders eventually leads to the retrieval of the medicine, but at every step of the way, it's clear the path we are witnessing is one of several avenues to completion. Man, oh man, I need to see this demo in action, because what I love more than anything is when a game markets itself off of, hey, we want to show you this part of the game because there are so many other ways to approach this that they're almost not even spoiling something, since in that moment, it really depends on what choices you're going to make as a player. Anyway, let's keep moving on. We still have a lot to get through. We're going to be talking about leader characters. As we all know, there's the aggressive playstyle, there's stealth playstyles, and then there's the leader characters where you kind of sit back and tell your companions what to do. With a leader character, it's an interesting jack of all trades, Kane says. You can change your playstyle on the fly on who you bring with you. Some people complement their skills with their companions, while other players will augment, improve an already great ranged long gun skill, or bring someone who can help improve your character's chances of tackling that tricky engineering problem in town, which your character on their own might be ill-suited to confront. It's a really interesting style of play, but it makes you pay attention to your companions, Kane continues, what weapons and equipment you've given them, and what their tag skills are. While it's perfectly okay to play the game as a lone wolf with no companions at your side, bringing party members to a challenging encounter can turn the tide. Each one employs a particularly potent special combat ability. In our demo, we meet Parvati, a somewhat naive mechanic from Edgewater, who smashes into her opponents with an impressive giant hammer. When her ability is triggered, the action briefly cuts away to see her big moment. She's one of a large cast of characters who join your crew, and eventually settle in aboard your spaceship. Later in the game, players meet Ellie, a professional gun for hire, with a dodgy past. Her pragmatism shines through, and an easygoing nature is apparent from even short conversations. Meanwhile, Felix is a young man who is ready to fight the system. The game's writers like to refer to him as a rebel without a cause or clue. He's aggressively idealistic and feels alienated by a society that wants to lock him into a life he never asked for. In fact, that trait unites these and the other companions that join the crew as you travel. All these companions are outsiders in one way or another, Boyarsky says. They are looking at the things going on in this colony, and they think it's crazy too. They never fit in. Maybe it's not as obvious to them as it is to the player or their character, but as the game goes on, they come more to that realization. So I'm going to be honest with you, I'm very interested in the companions because they sound viable in a combat perspective, which is an interesting focus for Obsidian. I trust in their writing ability for that to actually be there and for these characters to be compelling enough, but to make them focus on combat seems to be a big change of pace for them, because normally when it comes to the AI in Obsidian games, it's less than adequate, especially when it comes to ones that have a lot more action going on. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out when we get our hands on the title, but I'm curious to see if they can actually strike a balance between making them combat viable and also interesting as. Now let's talk a bit about the spaceship, which is your hub. Your vessel contains a map of the system, allowing you to visit new destinations as they become available, sort of like the Ebon Hawk in KOTOR. It's also where you're most likely to hear your companions request help in their own lives. Each has a brief but dedicated quest line that can be completed to unlock additional combat capabilities. And while your ship won't feature extensive customization or gameplay loops, individual rooms will adapt over time in response to your actions. In your own personal captain's room, collectible items you found in-game will begin to show up as physical objects. Companions who have had their personal missions completed will also have decor in their rooms shift. The ship is meant to be a hub, but one that is manageable and doesn't get in the way of the action. In the terms of size, it reminds me of Serenity, Kane says. It's a pretty decent sized ship, but you're not going to get lost in it. Now, I know some may be bummed out about the lack of customization or that it's not a huge hub area. Personally, I am drained of these large hub areas that is the center of so many games, because often it gets convoluted. Going from one mission to the next requires a lot more effort than it is really required. I like how things change a bit over time as missions are completed, collect things, but overall, I like how it's a bit tempered. As you rocket across the Halcyon system, character levels up and improves along a range of capabilities, just as you define the broader story. The focus is on letting you fully control your protagonist's progression. Attributes like strength, perception, and charm can be rated between very high and below average, and the way you set those up establishes an initial set of skill bonuses. Below average in any given attribute can lead to some challenging scenarios, but also a lot of humor. Tackle this space adventure with a very low intelligence, and new dumb dialogue options begin to show up, including at least one catastrophically stupid decision near the end of the game. Take below average strength, and melee weapons have a chance to hit, but instead of doing minimum damage, they might do more. It may end up being a tough trade-off, but those below average scores might give you a chance to really excel elsewhere and may be worth it for some players. So once again, the game's really feeling itself based off player experimentation and also replayability. Ultimately, that puts it in the player's hands when they actually have the game to decide how worthwhile their experience it is, and that also lies in the hands of Obsidian to make all those avenues to explore good. The skill system is built to encourage early experimentation and support both generalist players and those who aren't exactly sure what they want to focus on from the onset. To do that, initial attributes inform the starting value for all your individual skills. Thereafter, those skills of differing values are each part of a large bucket category. You may place points which are earned when you level up into one of the large buckets to improve all the skills within. But once any skill reaches 50, it no longer benefits from additional allocation to the broader skill group. At that point, you should hopefully have enough expertise to know where you want to specialize. For instance, if you like the idea of a mechanically inclined adventurer, you would start by focusing on the tech category. After investing heavily in that group of skills, your engineering skill might be the first to hit 50 because it benefited from earlier bonuses during character creation. Phobias are another big part of the Outer Worlds. Perhaps you have a genuine phobia of robots, and you must contend with lower stats when robots are around in the future. The choice to adopt a flaw is entirely optional, but it does immediately provide a precious additional perk. The game features 4 difficulty modes, from Story to Supernova, and besides other substantial changes to the experience, the higher difficulties allow you to take on more flaws and subsequently more perks. On Normal, the game holds you to a steady 3 flaws. On Supernova, it's up to 5. Now, I like how this game's handling difficulty. I don't know if what they're going to do is just add a larger health pool and change the damage enemies do to you. I hope the AI has different patterns based on the difficulty itself, but I like how there's a story difficulty, like Persona 5 had that, where pretty much if you're not good at first-person shooters or you're here for character interaction and choice and consequence, you can have just that. But if you're like someone like me who's going to probably play this on the normal difficulty and then come back and try it on Supernova and see what happens with all these additional flaws, but also the additional perks and having a pretty beefy character in one sense, but also a weak character in another, that's valuable for a player like me. So once again, this game is managing to strike a balance between the hardcore audience and someone who wants to tap in and give this game a try. Beyond innate character growth, the cultivation of your own personal equipment is central to progression. Light and heavy melee weapons, handguns, long guns, heavy ranged weapons, and a broad selection of different armor sets are available, and they often line up with traits of the specific corporations that manufactured them. Are you okay with weapons that degrade all the time, but are easily replaceable? Go for Spacer's Choice. Prefer to stick with high-end weaponry? Then you'll want T&L, and their famously solid manufacturing. If you're all about modding, you'll keep an eye out for weaponry from Hammersmith, which features extensive customization options. So bang, right there, different weapon types all across the board, and each manufacturer, along with a brand new one that we're really learning more about here, Hammersmith, offering modding options, which has me pumped as well. That's not all that's there. While not fundamentally more powerful than other forms of attack, science weapons do something downright strange. In some cases, these weapons came out of bugs, like strange ways that we were animating. We were seeing really weird stuff happen in videos, and we were like, we should make a science weapon that makes that happen on purpose. We saw one of these science weapons in action with the shrink ray, looking precisely like a ray gun in a old Flash Gordon serial. Weapons take any enemy in the game, scales them down as their atoms collapse. They take damage, their audio pitches up high, and they look ridiculous. It is hilarious. So the weapon selection in this game seems awesome. It also seems varied, and based off these scientific weapons being very different from all the others, I imagine those will be the rare weapons and armor that we could acquire in the game, similar to a Bethesda Game Studios title, which has me really pumped up. It kind of reminds me of the Wabbajack, because they seem to emphasize here in this write-up that these science weapons aren't more powerful, they just do crazy effects, and the Wabbajack in Skyrim did that. You transform people into random weird things, and it wasn't powerful, it was just fun to use, even if you weren't a mage. Our visit to Obsidian is also characterized by a refreshing lack of hyperbole about the scope and ambition of the Outer Worlds. Without a doubt, the passion and enthusiasm for the project was evident from everyone with whom we spoke, but it's also a game that knows the limits of a new franchise being created with limited development resources. It's a shorter experience than some of the bigger open world RPGs, Boyarsky openly admits, and it's not a continuous open world. We go to a bunch of different places with their own individual maps, and even within those maps, for instance, Monarch has a big open area that is contiguous, but even when you go to the towns, there are loads. It's smaller, but it's tightly crafted, as opposed to this giant enormous thing that has hundreds of hours. With our shorter timeline and budgets, that will allow us to make something that's more polished and a crafted game. Pretty much what they're doing here is tempering expectations. They know that there's a large demand for this type of game in the RPG genre because a lot of people have been yearning for it. I tell people all the time, if you're looking for a way to satiate that thirst for now, go play Vampire, the best RPG that dropped last year and in a very long while. Excellent game there. But I get where they're coming from. It's not this huge, gargantuan project in the terms of scope and scale. It's more so about the choices the player can make. And for RPG fans, I think they'll value that. Plus, you could probably get 100 hours out of the game with the amount of times you could replay it. We'll see. Anyway, last but not least is romance. Romancing your companions isn't in the game. Why? Because the team members we spoke with felt like they couldn't do justice to the concept the first time out. At the same time as Kane and Boyarsky speak, it's all they can do not to blurt out plans for sequels and expansions that might let them further explore these twisted outer colony worlds. If the scope of the first game is limited, it's certainly not because the imaginations of its creators are holding them back. Pretty much what we're seeing here is a company experimenting with a new IP, but not going all in. A recent example of something like that is, in a sense, Apex Legends. It's in the Titanfall universe, but it diverts itself from the name Titanfall. So in turn, the game may not, I guess, flop as badly, whereas Titanfall 2 was excellent, but didn't sell as well. And then obviously Titanfall 1 suffered a bit from exclusivity. We're seeing here a company that is just starting to get its feet underneath them financially, played a bit safe with their newest entry, and I think what they're focusing on now is cool and will satiate fans who are looking for a strong RPG, but also I feel this game is going to do really well, and in turn more expansions and DLC can provide us content that we were looking for in the base game and will be addressed. We'll see in due time. That was a huge drop of information for the Outer Worlds. I hope I didn't overwhelm you too much with all the reading I had to do. I tried to interject little breaks where I could give some commentary and my thoughts on top of it there, so it wasn't such a drawn out blah 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 reading the whole thing. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on this information in the comments down below. I mean, where do we begin, man? I can't wait for this game, and I really hope it comes out when I predicted, which is the fall. So fire away, and I'll catch you guys next time. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that, as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.